So moving on from there, the kind of intermediate stage, there we go, in the mid to late 19th century, sees also the rise of what are called wire services, and the Associated Press being the major one. And what these did is you've got people employed by the company all over the country. And now that they had the telegraph technology that could, rather instantaneously get information from, let's say, Texas to New York, for instance, through the telegraph wires, you could have stories from all over the country being pooled and then sold essentially to actual newspapers. So the Associated Press, they do have like a social media account, in different platforms now. It was never actually a newspaper itself. It was just a service that aggregated all the possible sort of stories around the country that they thought maybe the readers of newspapers might be interested in. And they would sell them to actual newspapers to run in them. And so what this does is, along with the innovations of the penny press, it helps to make the news not only more national, but also introduce this idea of breaking news, of news being timely, and the importance of being first to report on something, and that if one paper had a story from the AP, that the others needed to make sure that they kept up. So this is, again, another intermediate step in the modernization of news. That slides out of order. The style of news reporting still wasn't really what we would recognize as modern, though. And so I'm going to leave this to you to follow this link. It's in the slides, which are posted on Moodle, and consider the way that Abraham Lincoln's assassination was reported in a bunch of newspapers. This great Washington Post article that breaks it down and shows you how the conventions of the story construction were still very different, and the kind of writing, the sort of language that they used was not quite what we would recognize as the sort of dispassionate, sober, just the facts kind of approach that you see in the objective standard. We have this other sort of important phase of journalism called yellow journalism, another kind of phase of sensationalism, where you had newspapers like William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal. This is this sort of legendary figure in the history of media, and Joseph Pulitzer, where the most sort of infamous in yellow journalism episode involves the Spanish-American War, and more or less fabricating this event, the sinking of the ship that was the pretext for war. But there was also sort of branching out in the investigative journalism realm as well in these newspapers. So you have, again, this evolution of the type of content that appeared, that the public is interested in, and this connection, though, between sensationalism and sort of trying to sell a lot of newspapers for not very much. At this same time, though, that's an example of one of the kinds of things that they'd run a story on. At the same time, though, another newspaper tycoon, the Ox family, started thinking maybe there's another way to reach a mass audience. And so the New York Times in the 1890s really helped to pioneer the notion of objectivity as the standard of professional journalism. And so this intersects. This is like another good example of how media and sort of social circumstances intersect, because you have this profession, this group of people who work for newspapers for a living, who are kind of seen as this second-rate sort of profession, and they want to develop this more professional identity. And so the objectivity paradigm kind of helped to provide that. And so the next video will break down what objectivity means in a little more depth.